How much of a risk is, political tensions, trade wars, trade tensions between the US and China to the European economy?
This is a very important topic. Our role is not to comment about political decisions, but it is to look at the possible economic consequences of geopolitical decisions. And clearly trade wars, or let us call it protectionism, could have detrimental effect on global growth. Through the effects of tariffs, if they were to be introduced, we estimate a 10% general increase of tariffs to slow down world growth by more than 2%. But also, and already perhaps through uncertainty it introduced, without having tariffs yet, but business confidence could be affected by the threat of protectionist measures. It's what we have seen in Great Britain, like the Brexit referendum, and it's what could be seen at present in some Northern American countries like Canada. So we should be very cautious about avoiding as much as possible such detrimental measures to world growth.
I know you won't talk about politics, but do you worry about the Italian economy because of possible populist measures? So maybe labor reforms being pushed back and fiscal spending increasing too much?
Again, it's not our role to comment about politics, and it's still less our role to comment about domestic economic policy decisions, except for my own country. And this is my role, and we clearly welcome the acceleration of reforms in France, which is very spectacular. But if we look at the global picture in Europe, it remains very favorable. It is important that all countries use this economic environment to pursue their fiscal consolidation. And we should be extremely clear at the ECB, there will not be any kind of fiscal dominance. To put it in clear text, nobody should expect us to delay a warranted monetary policy normalization in order to accommodate the debt problems of any member state.
Would you say the same worldwide? Is growth strong enough? We were talking about monetary policy normalization almost worldwide, but then we saw some concerns on growth worldwide, which maybe were linked to what you were talking about with trade tensions.
Monetary policy is adapted to the domestic environment it has to deal with, be it in the Eurozone, in the US, or elsewhere. But what I said about fiscal consolidation in this favorable cyclical moment is true probably for other countries outside the Eurozone, including probably the US. We shouldn't implement, or governments shouldn't develop pro-cyclical fiscal policies which could accelerate the cycle now, but create problems in the future.
Governor, I know you don't want to talk about individual domestic growth, but is there danger that actually German growth has peaked? And again, what does that mean for ECB policy?
No, but I come back to the Eurozone growth as a whole. It is high, it is robust, and you couldn't expect an acceleration forever. Again, the last quarter of 2017 had a growth of 0.7%, which was especially high. So there is some kind of stabilization. At this stage, we think temporary factors are at work, but we will study cautiously, as always, if there could be some changes due, among others, to the protectionist threats we discussed about. But we are not yet there.
Do you think the threats of currency wars has died down compared to 2-3 months ago?
At present, we see no signs of currency wars. And clearly, we all committed, the G20 members and all the IMF countries, to target our monetary policies according to domestic goals, mainly price stability, and not to target our exchange rate for competitive purposes. This is the precise wording of the G20 in Buenos Aires in March, of the IMF communique in Washington, D.C. last April, and this is the way it should work. This is the way it works at present, which is good news. It brings stability in this uncertain world.
I know the ECB officials, and you won't talk about a euro target or a euro level, but is there a range that you have in mind for the ideal euro level for French exporters?
The short answer is no. we have no exchange rate targets. We look at the effects of the exchange rate on our inflation outlook, which is a different story. Some months ago, we said disorderly or excessive volatility of the exchange rate required monitoring from our side. If it would be again the case in the future, we would probably repeat the same thing.
A final question. I actually have two, but I think I only have time for one on crypto assets. You were talking about it in your speech in relation to one of the questions. What form do you think they'll become? And can it be dangerous for central banks that it takes so much weight?
First, you are right. It's about crypto assets and not cryptocurrencies, because as we said in the G20, they don't have the key attributes of a sovereign currency. The technology is very promising, blockchain, and we at the Banque de France are developing it in a very innovative way, but there are risks associated with these assets. But in the short run, not financial stability risks due to the rather low volumes, but risks about money laundering and risk about consumer protection. And on these two issues, the G20 required the Financial Stability Board and the standard setting bodies, including FATF for anti-money laundering, to study adequate responses till our next meeting in July. So expect more on these two issues. It's very important that we give precise guidelines to avoid threats, to avoid excesses from the development of these crypto assets.